And thanks for watching the Market Day Report. I'm Janet Adkison. Just under a month into the new Trans-Pacific Partnership, the level of concern in the ag sector about securing a trade deal with Japan is on the rise. RFD-TV's Sarah Mock has more.
A growing crisis as wheat growers in the Pacific Northwest deal with the loss of major markets in Asia.
We are definitely at an economic disadvantage to Canada and to Australia when it comes to Japan. We're not seeing any easement in the Chinese market, where we sold no wheat last year, and normally we sell about 61 million bushels there.
Japan is the largest export market in terms of revenue for American wheat farmers, mainly due to the country's high quality requirements. And Gould warns impacts have only just begun.
As of January, we had 50% of the export market to Japan, but with the tariffs still being in place on U.S. wheat and the reduction that Canada and Australia are going to get, we're expecting to drop or lose down to 23% of that market.
Though wheat has not gotten as much attention as other crops in trade discussions, they have seen one major win in recent weeks in regards to China.
The WTO does plan to rule against them on the domestic subsidy case that we have brought. We expect China to appeal it, so that will delay the decision even further, but still this is at least one positive step.
But WTO cases can take years to resolve, Gould says, and with a 25% tariff already on U.S. wheat to China, this victory offers little short-term relief. Republican senators are encouraging the president to re-engage with TPP, both to restore ag trade with Japan and to put more pressure on China. But others say they'll need to do more than encourage if a resolution isn't reached soon.
If this thing goes on into the summer, I think you'll see Congress step up, start having hearings, and maybe, unfortunately, have to take action if the president isn't able to get a deal in time.
That action in the short term will involve increased oversight of the president's trade agenda by Congress, but is unlikely at this point to include additional trade aid for farmers. For RFD-TV, I'm Sarah Mock in Washington.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, Iowa Senator and head of the Senate Finance Committee that oversees trade negotiations, Chuck Grassley, says a bilateral agreement with Japan could make up about 90% of what U.S. companies and producers lost when the U.S. exited the TPP. Well, in-person trade talks resume next week between the U.S. and China when officials meet in Washington, D.C. Appearing on CNBC, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross believes there's a fair chance the two countries will reach an agreement, but says expecting that to happen next week isn't realistic.
We're miles and miles from getting a resolution, and frankly, that shouldn't be too surprising. Trade is very complicated. There are lots and lots of issues. Not just how many soybeans and how much LNG, but even more importantly, structural reforms that we really think are needed in the Chinese economy. And then even more important than that, enforcement mechanisms and penalties for failure to adhere to whatever we agree to.
According to a poll report, President Donald Trump also remains optimistic, saying China very much wants to make a deal. We'll see what happens. I like where we are right now. The current U.S.-China trade truce is set to expire on March 2nd. And on the North American trade front, a letter sent to the White House from dozens of business and agriculture groups says damage from Canada and Mexico's retaliatory duties far outweighs any benefit that may accrue to them under the USMCA. A Purdue University policy brief shows the new North American Trade Pact would boost U.S. farm exports to the neighboring countries by about $454 million compared with NAFTA.